Hey everybody, Johnny here. It's been a little while. You might be thinking, what is Johnny doing? Well, I've been playing some Elden Ring. I put 100 hours into a new save file, went into the DLC with a fresh character, and got to experience, I think, really all of it or most of it. So today we're going to break it down, and I have three main areas I want to discuss with you. I want to talk about the exploration, the difficulty aspect that a lot of people have been discussing, some of the presentation and technical as well. So we'll get into it. There will be timestamps down below if you want to skip around. If you're new to the channel, welcome. It's nice to meet you. Probably. You're probably nice. Leave a comment or an emote down below to demonstrate so. And with that, let's get into it. There's been a lot of discussion around the difficulty of the game, so I want to straight up talk about that before we jump into anything else. Give you my opinion. You know, people ask me, is it really that hard? Can a new player get into it? And I think when you break it down, it is difficult content to get through. There's no doubt about it. But look back at the history. Every DLC that FromSoft has released has one-upped the base game. It's always been more difficult than the base content. DS3 was a pretty streamlined game to play through. In the base content, the DLC took it up a notch. We had some really tough bosses in that. So just kind of keep your expectations in check that they do try to up the ante with the DLC, which I think is fine to do. The way they do it, we can kind of break it down. The main difference that I noticed is when you compare it to the base game, where bosses have shorter combos and they have bigger windows for you to punish. In the DLC, you find that a lot of bosses have like 6, 7, 8 move combos, and you really have to wait until they're done. You have to wait until they're completely done with their combo, and then maybe you can get one hit in, one good hit, or two, tops. Short windows, you really have to learn the punish moments that you can go for, and you have to learn to recognize when a combo is done. This is a much more important skill in the DLC than in the base game. So the big difference for me is that in the base game, you can weave attacks in between the boss attacks a lot of times. And here, that's really punished. It doesn't really seem like they want you to do that. I think they are promoting this playstyle of completely wait until they are done and then you get your turn. It's tit for tat, they get their turn, you get your turn type thing, which is okay. But I have to admit, at times it does become frustrating, especially at first when you don't yet know the combos. So you have to give yourself some time. Like a lot of these fights are going to take time to learn, and that's okay. If you're not okay with that, I don't know if you should get into a game like this because you're almost signing a contract when you jump into it. I accept that I'm going to eat shit for the first few attempts. I'm going to have to learn some of the moves and everything. You kind of have to be okay with that. That's part and parcel of the experience. Now, the other thing is the game forces you to optimize your setup. You really have to look at your talismans, examine what damage is wrecking me. Maybe this boss has a lot of lightning damage, and guess what? I found this +3 lightning damage defense talisman during my exploration. Boom. And that makes a big difference, right? Or maybe the weapon I'm using isn't that conducive in this fight. I found that in the base game, I could get around any fight with the same weapon. It didn't really matter. And here, what I actually found is that different weapons will suit a boss much better. So, for example, I had some short claws that worked really well for a lot of encounters, but other times the range of them was too short. I had a hard time sticking to bosses, and a longer weapon really benefited me. The final fight is one where I found a weapon that had a lot of bleed, and that was the best strategy to get some damage in, especially using my Mimic tier. So try stuff. And one good thing that the DLC does as well is that it gives you extra materials that allow you to respec your character. So don't be afraid to try a different build. You know, if you find a weapon that seems really interesting, maybe give that a try. Switch your stats around, see what works. The one thing that you will need is a lot of HP. So at least, you know, vigor set to 60 is probably a good recommendation overall for you to aim towards for the DLC content. You need a lot of HP. These bosses aren't kidding around. They do a lot of damage. The other thing, make sure you're collecting the tree fragments around the world. This is something the game very early on teaches you, that these are, you know, spread all over the place. Sometimes they're dropped by mobs. So it's a very important skill for you to practice, is to be looking for these actively in the world. And these make a very big difference. If you try to fight some of the big bosses without any fragments, you will notice you're almost getting one shot by them. And it's a dramatic difference once you do pick up a good number of these. So definitely take your time exploring. You have to sign this in your gaming contract. I will have to explore to have a good time in this game. You know, it is part and parcel of the experience. So if you want a super Golden Path streamlined experience where you don't have to explore, you don't have to retry bosses, this just ain't the game. Unless you're some magical gamer that can do stuff, you know, first try, and you're just that good. But for most of us, we're going to have to work our asses off. We're going to have to explore stuff and get stronger to succeed. And that, in a way, works to make the experience more rewarding, because when you do get past those bosses, it is a direct result of you honing in your skill, honing in your build, trying different builds. It's very rewarding when it does happen. Now, there are some issues with the game itself. So, you know, we know camera is a big problem, especially with some of these bosses that are higher up than you are. You will notice at times the boss center of mass is so high up that when you lock your camera and you're very up close to the boss, the camera is like trying to look way up and you actually can't see anything. So the lock-on is a little bit of a trap as well. You really have to get comfortable with not locking on at times, especially if you're close up to a boss or maybe close up to a wall, or if you have two bosses, right? So you have to get comfortable with not locking on. Other times, by not locking on, you can also walk directly behind the boss much easier than if you're actually locked onto it. The other thing I feel is a little bit of a trap is the summons. Now, a lot of times you will have NPC summons that you can use. You can also summon players to help you. I didn't try with players. I tried some of the NPC summons, and overall I found that they make the fights less enjoyable. Because yes, they do help you join the aggro, but actually bosses are pretty good at changing the target mid-combo. So they start a combo focusing the NPC, and all of a sudden they're focusing you, and it's pretty unpredictable. So it actually makes fights quite challenging, and that compounds with the fact that their HP goes way up. All of a sudden, you're having to deal twice the damage. The summon really doesn't do that much damage compared to you. So you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and really it's just becoming more confusing because you don't know if you're being targeted sometimes or the summon. So I really actually recommend people don't use summons that much and rely instead on your mimic tier or some other ash that you prefer. I really think the mimic tier continues to be the best option. There are some really good ashes that you can get in the DLC itself that are also very good recommendations. But when it comes to the big bosses, they're gonna neuter a lot of the good ashes because they just hit very hard. So the mimic tier I found can withstand a lot of hits. And if you have something like bleed in your weapon, the Mimic tier is going to do a great job inflicting that status. I had some other frustrations with bosses, like some of them are really hard to parse visually because there are so many particles and effects and animations, pirouettes, and stuff going on. Like at times it was very hard to tell what is actually an attack, being cast on me, what is just flourish. The final boss is just a light show of stuff. It's very hard to parse what is actually going to hit you versus what's just a decoration. I think they kind of went overboard with some of these. Personally, it was very hard to parse some of them. So that was definitely a difficulty initially for me. There were some issues with hitboxes too, and there are plenty of videos you can find of a lance attack coming in, but actually not connecting at all with your character and still hitting you. So there are some problems with those, but I would say for the most part, if you're dying, it's your fault, which is great. I really enjoyed the fact that you didn't have to do long corpse runs. If people who don't know, this means when you die in a boss, you don't have to tread through a whole area to get to the boss again to retry it. Good distribution of bonfires, making it really easy for you to jump back into the boss. Bosses also have the tendency to not give you any time. When you enter the arena, they're attacking you straight away. And this sometimes is annoying because you may have to pick up your souls. You may want to put down your Mimic tier or summon an NPC. Like sometimes the NPC summon tag is inside the boss arena and you're there trying to summon an NPC and interact with the dialogue, and you're already getting blasted with a giant explosion from the boss. So come on, chill guys. Give me 3 seconds for me to set up. We're going in. I actually really appreciate the fights where you have to walk a little bit into the boss for him to start attacking you. Just a courtesy to the player. Okay, let me situate myself. I'm getting my summon, right? But overall, I would say most boss designs are pretty solid outside of those frustrations that I was talking about. And I had a pretty good time learning, I think, most of them, actually. There was one area that I won't spoil for you, where the gameplay changes substantially, and you basically have to do a big stealth segment. I didn't love this. I heard a lot of people, ooh, it's different, it's innovative. I don't know if it's innovative. The fact that it isn't in other Souls games doesn't make it innovative. It's just you're putting something here that usually isn't here, probably for a good reason. It was a very frustrating part, not really that rewarding, not really that interesting, just needed a lot of patience and quite a bit of time. So I didn't love the stealth segment. You let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it. But yeah, it is something different. Let's talk a bit about the exploration in the game. The areas are incredible. They did an amazing job creating some inspired, interesting areas to go through. They're densely packed with stuff to discover. And what you find is oftentimes meaningful. It can be armor, sometimes full armor sets, new weapons with interesting skills and very, very powerful weapons. You can find Ash of War, ashes that you can summon to help you in fights, a lot of stuff, and the tree fragments, of course. So exploration is really meaningful here, and you find a lot of cool stuff, and it really rewards you for taking the time to explore, look at every nook and cranny. And the game world has this amazing but grim looking setup, which makes it so impactful when they use color to contrast with that. It's really incredible when you go into some of these areas and there's the contrast of bright color in some things with the grim, dark, dire exterior. So I absolutely love the use of color here, not only in areas, but actually bosses too. Some bosses have incredible particle effects, and use of color in some of them absolutely blew me away. There was no ice biome. It's always a ding on my part when you don't have an ice biome. But I do love my snowy peaks. But it was incredible. There were some amazing vistas going high up mountaintops and all sorts of things like that. They really did a good job matching some of the discovery from the original game. I mean, what a task. The original game is just colossal, right? With so many different areas and vistas. And to try to do something similar is very ambitious for a DLC. But I think they did a really good job with a lot of the areas, making them very interesting, very compelling to explore. The day-night cycle also continues to give you this duality that's very cool. So it not only looks very different, right, to explore an area at night or during day, you also have some stuff that only shows up during night or day, which is that functional layer, right, where you actually have a difference in behavior depending on the day-night cycle. Very cool. There's also a really good distribution of bonfires around the world. Really allows you to get around very easily and avoid a lot of backtracking. You also have these springs that allow you to jump with the horse, and these also allow you to short circuit some of the backtracking you would otherwise have to do. I think this is really important because it can be very frustrating to go through areas packed with mobs, right, over and over again. So very cool that you don't have to do it as much in this. I really enjoyed being able to travel everywhere and find a mission here and then having to go back to a place, to collect something. And the ability to just jump all over the map continues to be a really cool highlight here. And just discovering this map is an amazing feeling. I think the map in both the original game and the DLC are such a satisfying thing to do, to get the full picture. Because you keep wondering, wait, how far south does this go? With the fog of war in the map, initially you don't know how big the map is, and you start to discover it, and you go, whoa, this goes here. Can I go to this island? There's a lot there to explore. Very cool. And some of these areas are just absolutely grandiose, right? The way like the castles look and everything, exploring these castles and finding the different paths into them. Like some of these areas have multiple accesses and some of them are just crazy. So, you find this completely other area that now connects back to this big castle that you were in. It's almost like a kind of Dark Souls 1 thing, but on steroids at times. Really cool to see. Love what they did with the interconnectedness of some of these areas. Talking a bit about the presentation and the technical aspect of the game, like I was saying, the contrast of color with the dire world works so well. It's so impactful when you do see that bright color. Absolutely love the use of it. Also during bosses, one of my favorite bosses in the DLC has this amazing like bright yellow coloring to their attacks. It's fantastic stuff. And some of the visual designs for bosses are just amazing, right? You're not even angry when they kill you because you know what? You're an awe-inspiring Giga Chad. Take me now. Fantastic stuff. The animations are great with some incredible particle effects too and explosions and everything. Again, like I was saying, sometimes it goes over a line and it makes it really hard to parse what they're doing, but you can't deny that they are just visually really impressive and beautifully crafted. And some of these castles are also beautifully crafted. They're giant in magnitude and scope and intensity, and just exploring them, finding these little hidden accesses to them and all the interconnectedness and almost like puzzle-like exploration, right? The classic dungeon thing where, maybe you turn something in the middle and now you can cross through a platform that you couldn't before. All this type of stuff is there in spades. Great feeling of exploration, but also just the visual of it. Really, really cool to do. You see a giant ass castle in the distance. And yes, as the meme goes, you can go there, you can explore it, and there's so much to look at and enjoy. When it comes to the performance of the game, I did have some issues, especially in the final boss, because there's so many explosions and things, flashbangs, that I did get some frame rate drops that kind of annoyed me. There were also sometimes during the game where you would have a little hiccup for like 1 second and then go back to normal. So there were some issues there, but overall, most areas had a stable FPS at 4K with a 3090. So it's a solid system, but still, love to see a stable frame rate at 4K. That's what I need in a Souls game, right? We need that frame rate locked at 60. That's how I play. I just want 60 at all times, especially for bosses, really important. And I got it for most of it. So I would say, as a package, very solid presentation and performance for what I wanted. I'd love to hear from you. How was your journey with the DLC, and what was the hardest boss? I want to hear right now from everybody right down below. What was the hardest boss in the DLC for you? I'm very, very curious. And you know what? If you didn't play it, leave me your favorite emote and we'll do an empirical study of what's the most popular emote and why it's the eggplant. And until next time, take care, everybody.